Hello and welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. I am Nula and this is my co-host
Matt.
Matthew the Wizard.
Oh, that sounds. We should have do that
Every week.
all the time now.
No.
That's the standard.
So, Matthew.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
Welcome
yes,
to the
Nula.
show. Episode number 18. We are going to touch on a few things today, but we thought we would dive into autoimmune diseases.
There's a bit of that going around.
Yeah, seems to be on the increase, on the rise. And why would you say that is, Matt?
I think it's multifactorial. I think our lifestyle is simply not congruent with being a human, product of nature. I think we are taught what to think and what to do. We're not taught how to think, and we're not taught to look after ourselves, really. We're taught to be a certain way, think a certain way, do certain things, and if that's against someone's individuation, then it creates the discord.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the seed.
Oh, cool. So felt like there was heaps of different avenues we could go, but let's stick to what we're going to talk about today, which is autoimmune, which is exactly what you're talking about. What I'm saying is that what I was thinking then was just that, so there's something in our environment that is essentially detrimentally impacting us.
Yeah.
And so do you want to give us, so from a Western medicine perspective, we look at autoimmune, or it's seen to be an attack of one's cells on itself. Usually I think potentially defined by some form of like virus or infection or...
Well, that's the medical catalyst, you could
Yes.
say, yeah.
So there's like this, something got in and then attacked the body, and then the body somehow thought that was them and now attacks themselves.
Well, the immune system would see it as a foreign invader, but it sees itself as a foreign invader. So that's arguably symbolic of not recognising itself.
Yeah, not being able to distinguish between who is me and who is not me.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this like conjoinment occurring between this virus or illness or pathogen and the self. And now they are one in the same, so the body can't distinguish which is which, yeah?
So then it just goes after it.
So would you say that do you think that we're born with these things? Like, do you think that it is, okay, I've got this genetic disposition, I've then now been exposed to this particular sickness or pathogen, and now I'm bound to have an autoimmune experience?
I think if you think that way, you've already put your mindset onto it. Therefore, it's likely going to manifest physically. I'm not a big fan on blaming genetics. I think if we do have that, let's say, we still have every opportunity to not get that.
Totally.
But it's you can say you can get a virus, you can say you can get some kind of infection, some kind of illness, disease, whatever. That can be the basis of an autoimmune dysfunction. That's purely from a physical point of view. We also have a mind, we also have emotions. The mind builds the reality, the emotions control the body. So we don't even look at that from a medical viewpoint. So for me, that's the physical stuff can take care of itself to a degree. There is a point of no return.
As in, when you say that, you mean the physical stuff like in general, or do you mean the
physical stuff in general, but also autoimmune.
So the body attacking the body. That can take care of itself.
To a point, yeah. But as I said, if you can get something early, the earlier it is, the easier it is. But if they've had it undiagnosed for many, many years, the harder it is, because now it becomes imprinted into the system.
Yeah.
But the
pattern of pathogen.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of things that can be reversed. A lot. And
from your perspective, would you say that is incorporating the mental, the emotional and the physical as one rather than seeing them as separate parts?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't separate them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting because it's sort of this idea of autoimmune being this idea of attacking yourself, and then this idea that it is the pathogen that is the catalyst to that process. And not to say that that isn't necessarily true, but it is really interesting that people that tend to have even the simplest autoimmune, like something like asthma or I don't know, a rash, like reoccurring rashes.
The rheumatoid arthritis is a big one.
Yeah, massive. And like you can go into, like we can just look at that and go, oh yeah, well, there's big emotion in that.
Suppressed emotion.
Absolutely. And when you said before this idea of we've got to catch it early, it just reminds me of one of my first lecturers who essentially said that whilst it's still in the chi phase, which essentially is that it's not physically manifested, we have the most power because we can actually adjust it. And that's when the first symptom comes. That's when the first moment of disharmony occurs. And it sort of reminds me of like these sort of, you know, for example, childhood diabetes, like they start at such a young age. So there's an aspect of the parent in that. And as much as it's really hard to look at that as a parent, it's really hard. And I don't mean to guilt parents into feeling like you've done this to your child. That's not what I'm meaning. But it is a little bit of like, it's not about necessarily from my perspective to take responsibility for that in a sense of like taking that on as your own burden, which I think you do no matter what, because you're a parent, you're going to take on whatever that child is experiencing. However, there is, I would say moving forward, like we've got people with autoimmune diseases that come and see us after like 20, 30 years of having those autoimmune diseases that have been taking medications this whole time. And then they come to us and we can say, hey, you can actually do this differently. We can give you a different route. That means that at the end of the day, you're not just going to move into oblivion and deterioration where your body and flesh actually just becomes like soup.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is, well, a problem is that we become so dependent on a system that only gets paid when you're sick.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that guy, but
you are that guy.
It's a business.
Absolutely.
They make profit when people are sick.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be at least acknowledged, not ignored, but acknowledged. And I'm not saying never use it, because I'm glad it's there. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. However, I think as a collective mindset, I think we put too much power into it. The more power we put into that, the less we have for ourselves.
Totally.
If we think a pill's going to save all our problems, then we have no power.
And I think it sort of brings us back to that that idea of what autoimmune is, right? So autoimmune being that and I feel like you're going to touch on this and go deeper into it, but it's that we now cannot distinguish ourselves from other. And we therefore, our immune system specifically is saying, I don't know what is me and what is not me. So I'm scared and I'm just going to attack everything. And then if we look at like the layers of what we've experienced in terms of a pandemic, what that actually feels like in the modern world pandemic, you know, in olden times that pandemic couldn't have happened because the work that we do today is mainly on a computer. So we can do this whole separation and, you know, go down that route and we can do those things. Old school, no, not a chance. What were you going to do when everyone uses their hands for work? And that's how you lived. Like you wouldn't survive because there would be no farmers in the farm or workers in the farm actually collecting the food or growing the food. So then there'd be no, you know, it's like we kind of, it's almost like, that idea of being somewhat seemingly planned makes more and more sense because it's this, hang on a minute, like we could do that and somehow survive. And then the repercussions of that experience has economically destroyed many people. So therefore their whole function of like self, non-self, that like, where do I start? Where does someone else start? How do I actually like function in this world as in the collective?
Yeah.
So much. And to me, like, before this even happened, there's such a, you know, like you were saying at the beginning about who we are. We don't really know who we are because we're so indoctrinated to be what everyone wants us to be and to do things the way everyone wants us to do, because the system is set up to support that. We are set up in our system to support people that do as the system wants us to do. And I'm not saying that's detrimental in all ways, but only in my own experience. We are not set up in our world to have organic food because it's too expensive, because the energy that the farmer has to put in to actually support that way of farming is really difficult when you're not being supported. And I think that's one thing that other governments in other parts of the world have sort of done really even worse, is that they subsidize people to grow monocrops and to therefore grow the monocrop.
Well, they supply the seed as well.
Totally.
That are already insect proof.
Yeah, genetically modified.
Yeah.
And
the farmers have to pay certification to be organic.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
But it's like, so that from my experience, from my personal experience and the experience I have of patients that actually commit to an organic food, like, and I mean, I'm not eating everything organic, but I do try my very best to eat majority organic, and it does make a massive difference in my life and the way that my brain functions and the way that my system moves and functions. So I can't deny that that has an undoubtable imprint. But the system's not set up to support me in that.
No, and going back to what you said about people not knowing who they are, that reminded me of a quote from Carl Jung, who said, the world's going to ask who you are. And if you don't know who you are, the world's going to tell you who you are without you in mind. So with the system set up that way, then you go through life not really living your life. You're living someone else's. Living from a place of pure ego, which is, you know, when I say ego, it's mainly without the acknowledgement of the intangible stuff. Thinking it's just ego, that's it. Nothing else there. Nothing behind that. You go from that place, then you can see how it's really easy to take everything personally, because most of the people you interact with on a day-to-day basis, you don't know that well. You might see them at work for a day, but there's still 16 hours of a day that you don't know what they're like. You don't know what they're like at home. You don't know what they're like in relationships, etc. So you see what you see, you hear what you hear, and then you have to fill the missing pieces in with your own biases and make judgments based on that. So you have to fill in most of that yourself. Now, if you have a conversation with someone and it doesn't go so well in your own perception, not like we've ever had that.
Never happened to us. Very uncommon. Tell me more, Matt.
Yes.
How does that feel for you?
So I was like, go home and sharpen my knife. It's fine. So you could see with someone who doesn't know who they are, they can take that really personally. And that's going to eat them away. And just little by little, day by day, week by week, add poor diet onto that. And then you add, let's say a global event happens and you get...
Or like a recent global event, like a pandemic.
Hypothetically, yeah.
Okay.
So everyone's being told what to do.
Yeah.
If you don't have the sense of self, you're just going to blindly follow the pack for a multitude of reasons, but because everyone else is doing it, you're first. If you don't know who you are, then you don't know where you stand in relation to that.
And it's going to be safest to go with the pack.
Absolutely.
It's always safest in the pack than it is to be
in numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Regardless of what it actually is, without doing your own looking into it and thinking, well, that doesn't make sense to me, or okay, yeah, I can see where that comes from, or talking to another person, I'm not sure about this. What do you think? What do they think? And getting as many opinions about it as possible.
Or how does this feel? How does this feel for you?
Yeah, if your internal truth buzzer isn't working, that's because you don't know who the person in the mirror is. So if you don't know who the person in the mirror is, it's easy to get washed down the stream without knowing who you really are with it.
Or I'd like to say pushed upstream.
Pushed up, yeah. It's probably more accurate, yeah. Hold on. Pushed upstream, and you're just going against the resistance the whole time, but that resistance isn't external, it's internal. And after a while, then you have people who oppose that idea, let's say, and it's opposing the popular opinion, we'll call it, and then you have a relationship with that automatically because you've just perceived it. And now it's almost your duty to fight against that, like the opposing idea.
Right. So we end up being in the kind of, because I'm being pushed upstream, that feels safe. That's the pack. That's where everyone's going. I follow. I feel safest there. Now someone's telling me to go down the stream and
well,
just
you see someone going down the stream.
Oh, and then we're going to
it's like,
sink their raft.
That's not right. They should be going with us.
Yeah, okay.
So it works from a multitude of angles, but essentially...
So do they become the enemy?
Exactly.
That's one of the greatest psychological powers that human beings have, is that's how wars can actually exist, because we can teach people that there is an enemy that you need to fight against and forget the humanness that every person is a human.
Absolutely.
That has a heart beating, that has a soul, that has chosen to be in this moment.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that is when that's happening, you're going upstream.
Yeah.
You see other people going downstream.
Yeah.
You might even be curious about the downstreamers, we'll call them.
Yep.
But then as you move towards that, people who are pushing you upstream drag you back.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're faced with a decision. Do I investigate the downstream, or do I keep going upstream because it's safer and I'm with everyone I know? But what that's really saying, because it's acting from a place of essentially conditioned ego. Our ego is mostly other people's opinions and ideas, then because they've got the deepest imprint into our unconscious.
Yeah.
So if I'm not going upstream anymore, then I'm going to be isolated.
Yeah.
And that produces a lot of fear in a lot of people, and that cripples the immune system as well.
And that brings us full circle, right? So that whole aspect of it makes perfect sense that at the end of this big experience that we've all experienced and walked, where we've had the upstream and we've had the downstreamers, and we can see both of them. And with the baseline, with majority of people being connected to a system that feels safest, that essentially guides us in the way that we educate our children, in the way that we birth our babies, in the way that we traverse pregnancy, traverse diet and lifestyle emphasis, the way that we live, the way that we like hang out in our contained boxes, the way that we lock our cages at night in case some poor old soul that needs a meal wants to come in and use our kitchen that isn't being used, or take our TV when we've got 4. Like, I don't want you to come in and take my TV. Please don't take it. I mean, we have one, but it lives in a box in our cupboard and we pull it out every now and then. And it's so strange to people.
You're talking about the TV still?
My TV,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
What were you thinking I was talking about? Where'd I go? Who knows? But yeah, that idea that this person can come into our home and we're upset with them. Like, get the fuck out of my home. This is my home and I've caged myself in here. Like, that is our life. That is our world. That's our environment. Like, my partner locks our door at night. I always laugh. I'm like, well, keep him out, you know. Wouldn't want him to take any extra food from our fridge that is full.
Well, it's also funny because a couple hundred years ago, let's say when we were in the tribal days,
Okay.
it would have been polar opposite. You would have wanted as many people around you as possible.
Totally.
As many as possible. So it's one indication of how far we've actually come as a species. But it's also with the system thing, we're conditioned from very, very early in life
Totally.
to worship doctors, teachers, and priests.
And money.
Well, money's
We're taught to worship it.
yeah,
It is really...
It is a god,
It
yeah.
is a god too.
yeah. There's a reason why doctors wear white coats.
Oh,
Typically.
so they look like God?
Close.
Oh,
Very
tell me
close.
more. Tell me
Because
more.
white represents spirit,
Okay.
divine spirit.
Divinity.
So all the shamanic elders in each tribe used to wear white cloaks.
I have to get myself a white cloak.
So
Have you got yours?
please.
Just a couple.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost it.
You did. You
Divert
rudely
to
interrupted.
Well, you rudely interrupted me. No, I'm joking. I just wanted to say that if that's our baseline of indoctrination, of worshipping the spirit, so that's it. It's like utilizing this. The system really beautifully has utilized this.
Credit where it's due.
Yeah,
done
they've
well.
utilized this power of spirit and knowing that that is like an innate human aspect where, the spirit is of higher divinity, and then utilize that to put the people that they would place in authority in that space. And I mean, to be honest, it's not that I actually feel like in many ways back when doctors were, like when shamans or, medicine women or medicine men or whoever it was, when they were important. They were very important in the tribe. So it doesn't stray too far from that in a sense for them to be wearing white.
Not at all, yeah.
But it is the fact that there is aspects of even the system, the education of those systems that have been it's compartmentalized everything, and that's when we only look at the physical body. Where if we bring this back to, and this is what I was trying to get to, which I was a bit slow with, where we all have started before this big experience of life change. And this is answering the question of why autoimmune is potentially going up. We started with a level of systemic indoctrination, which had us believing and trusting away from ourselves, so we didn't actually understand who we were anymore because it was safest to go upstream already. And now when we have this big experience of, a really detrimental, potentially really detrimental and dangerous virus, that we have, then it's most important to stick on that trajectory. But the thing that didn't take into consideration was the mental and the emotional of all humans and their ability and all layers of health status and all layers of things like that, like the whole, because we're already systemically, here's your blueprint. We're giving it to you.
Yep.
This isn't actually you. So you're already a bit confused as to who you are. But the one thing you do know is that you follow the stream. You follow the upstreamers. And you know that going upstream and that resistance, that's what we call life. Life is hard, life is tough, and you keep battling it out. So then all of a sudden we've got this feeling, and then we sort of come out the other side, and we're probably I would say it was probably been 12 months after. So I'd say we're almost 2 years after it felt like it had kind of dissipated. But it's like, or maybe not quite 2 years, but either way, it feels like there's somewhat form of we've kind of come to a bit of complacency again, where everything seems to be, even though things feel a bit shaky, a bit wobbly for a lot of people, our sense of self hasn't been renewed or replenished, or for some it has. For some there was a huge eye-opening, whoa, I don't actually want to go up the stream. I want to go down the stream, because down the stream feels less resistant, feels softer, feels much more in line with who I am. I now understand what's important to me because I understand me more. But then the people tend to be going upstream all of a sudden have more and more of this or potential autoimmune aspects, all these new viruses that are essentially impacting and implicating. And, I think we'll see more and more of that. And I do really have a positive outlook and hope that people are going to recognize this more and more as a disconnect from self.
Yeah.
And then when we start to recognize that as, oh, I'm disconnected from self, like what way should I go now? And I'm talking about autoimmune that has started later in life and not childhood experience.
Yep.
Because I'm talking about when you actually perceive self
Yep.
in a conscious way.
Yeah.
And maybe that is me just thinking that people perceive themselves in conscious ways. But I think you do perceive it in a way, but you don't actually maybe have the...
I think you can perceive it. You'll perceive it how you perceive it. But that perception comes from the sense of self. And even if you were upstream and now you're, let's say, thinking about downstream or downstream now, even owning I was upstream, but now I'm downstream. As soon as you own it, you grab your power back straight away. And not many people realize the art of brainwashing. It's so simple to brainwash someone. Would you like me to quickly
Go.
hypnotize you?
I'm ready.
So first of all, you have to have acquired target.
I'm the target.
Sure. Now, once you've acquired your target, you need to create chaos.
I'm concerned.
You should be.
Okay.
This is from what you said to me before. So,
All right. Chaos ensued.
okay,
How are you
you got chaos?
Okay, I don't know. Chaotic.
Have some chaos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shit.
So we got chaos. Now I need to inundate you with images,
Yep.
headlines,
Okay.
non-stop.
Okay.
Now for you to register that unconsciously and subconsciously, you need to see it, depending on the research, it can be anywhere
Come on, quickly.
from 12 to 24 times in 24 hours.
Okay, that was too much.
The average person is 19. If you see that 19 times in 24 hours, that's going to imprint into your psyche. So you're going to associate a certain image, certain headline or word with the chaos. Mm-hmm. Now I need to keep inundating you. As I keep inundating you, someone over there is going to say, no, that's bullshit. So I've got to cancel them. I've got to get rid of them. They have to go because they go against my plan.
As the brainwasher.
Yep.
Oh, enemy. There's your enemy.
Yep. So I need to get rid of those. Now you're in all this chaos. Everything is lost, right? Life is hopeless. Oh, I have I'm going to dangle a carrot of hope here.
Oh, okay.
But the condition is you have to have this carrot. It's not that carrot over there. It's not that. Don't listen to them. They're evil. They're crazy. Whatever. Here's the carrot and you get to go and participate in life. That's the only way you can participate in our society because this is the heaven. This is the promised land right here. So you have the carrot. I'll simply wash, rinse, repeat.
Okay.
So now you're brainwashed.
Feeling like I want that carrot.
Well, that's all there
Quite
is
hungry.
to it. And the media knows this. TV programs know this. The medical system knows this. Catholic Church knows this. It's once you see that formula, and please don't take my word for it, go out and
Have a little
experience
look around.
it. Yeah, you'll see it everywhere.
Can we use that in a good way?
Absolutely.
I don't really like the idea of chaos though.
How about truth? We tried that. It didn't work, did it?
I mean, it did work. We're not
Depending
we're now like, instead of going downstream on a raft, we're now going downstream in a like jet boat. So people came together.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on this thing that you've briefly, I mean, you told me before and I wrote it down for you to talk about today, which you haven't touched on, which I've been kind of beating around, but you haven't quite gone there. But I sort of want to talk about that feeling of where autoimmune issues and diseases come from. And we have talked about this idea of lack of self, but I want you to go more into that feeling of lack of self-love. So the love aspect of that. And how, what you just said in terms of being pushed upstream constantly, literally systemically we've been pushed upstream, and then we had this big chaotic moment that we then pushed upstream, and then the promised land or the carrot was at the top of the stream, so you had to get up the top and everyone had to work together to go up to the top, and that was the only option. You had to get to the top of that stream. But then if someone turned around and said that someone turned around and said, actually, you know what? I got really curious about going downstream instead. And I realized that that carrot up there didn't look as good as the way that I could essentially go down the stream and smell the flowers and connect to a community of people that felt softer and less fearful and more love. And I think that absolutely wasn't necessarily true in terms of the pandemic, because there was just as much fear and hate going downstream as they were being pushed upstream. So I imagine that autoimmune isn't going to be just for the people that essentially were so afraid and pushed themselves upstream through any experience in their life or any experience of the chaos then brainwashing type stuff. But yeah, talking in terms of specifically autoimmune aspects of disconnecting from self, being indoctrinated to be disconnected from self, and then now sitting back in this idea of lacking that self-love. Can you
Expand
or take it away from me?
Okay. So with all the things you just said there about disconnecting from self, and when you're disconnected from yourself, there is an innate desire for connection on even the deepest level, unless you're completely apathetic, which some people are. But for the majority of people seeking that connection, if there isn't a sense of self, then they're going to form an attachment to something or someone else. So that attachment can be any person, place, thing, and to the degree they're invested into that attachment, they think they now possess that attachment. It's theirs. And they rely on that attachment to make themselves happy. Now, if that attachment isn't making them happy, it's likely going to create some kind of frictive emotion within the person and their relationship to that attachment. So they become like a newborn child with mum. There's that attachment there. And at that age, it's required for survival. But unconsciously for that person, it's required for survival.
Continuously,
24/7. So a lot of people can think about autoimmune as poor diet. Yes, that's a factor. However, our mental configurations and our thoughts and our emotions are with us 24/7. Food comes and goes. Average retention time is 55 to 72 hours.
What? That feels really long.
Yeah. So that's how long the molecules of that food.
Oh, the whole complete process of that coming in and going out. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So let's say you have anger, hypothetically. Chill. So that anger at some level is just going to simmer away. Mm-hmm. It's going to be there 24/7, at least 16 hours of the day when you're awake. It's just at a low level all day, every day.
Fuck, sounds terrible.
And yes, I am trying to tell you something. So
slow simmering.
Yeah. So, but that a lot of people have anger, especially now post event, and potentially waiting for another one. There's a lot of anger, but a lot of people don't know where to point that anger.
Do you have to point it somewhere?
You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
So, but a lot of people are looking to point it because they can't point it back at themselves.
But that's
hence the sense of self. So,
see this, guys? See this? I'm pointing my finger forward. Right?
Totally fine.
If you point your finger forward, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Yeah.
See it?
Yeah. So that comes back to the quote I mentioned before is the world's always going to ask who you are.
Yeah.
But if you don't know,
They'll tell you.
the world's going to tell you without you in mind. So the world tells you who you are, what you're supposed to do, but you don't want to do that on some level. So it creates a bit of frustration.
Resentment.
Yeah.
Friction.
You have to go to work to do this thing. A child has to do things, an adult chooses to do things. But most people have that mentality of, well, I've been told this, so I have to do it.
Oh, man. That is
So that creates that, you know, when you're a child and you didn't get an ice cream or whatever you wanted, so you chuck a tantrum. Not me, because I was perfect.
Well, you obviously cooked now
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you didn't experience your feelings.
No, didn't.
There's that resentment that we're seeing 16 hours of the day. Fucking hell. It's all coming out here today, guys.
So that's how that works from a kind of more of a psychological, mental, emotional level for the immune. Because then you take things personally. We all take things personally. Not really.
Because we're the center of our own universe.
We are, 100%. But no one thinks about us as much as we do.
No.
But we think everyone else is thinking to plot something against us, or
Depending on your own issue.
Of course, yeah.
Depending on what did you write before? I say before, which I really liked. I didn't write down. It's like your pattern. Essentially, it's your patterns are more. They are. What did you call those? They're more you than the food that you eat. So we can't. We have to be really conscious of the pattern and the story that's playing over and over and over, because that is us constantly.
Yeah.
That doesn't dissipate. Whereas the food we eat, we've got, a few days with that food, of that energy of that food.
No, it's gone.
Yeah, so it's being really conscious of what's going on inside of us.
So if you think you're being attacked all the time, then you need to put a shield up. So the immune system is our shield. But if we think we're being constantly attacked all the time, it's going to get fatigued at some point.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realise is there's several branches of the immune system, and one branch of the immune system is actually called the complement system. Have you heard of that?
Probably not, because I'm not one to give compliments.
Truer words never spoken, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, if you get one, you should be feeling pretty bloody good.
So we're still waiting.
I only speak the truth.
So,
So be better.
So approximately every 20 years or so, our body goes through a complete cleanup. That's why even healthy people will, every 15 to 20 years, I think, it's roughly around that time period, the immune system just does a complete overhaul. And a lot of people will get sick for absolutely no reason whatsoever. That's usually the complement system just doing a full-on cleanse out.
Really interesting, because around that 15-year mark is when a lot of people, I mean, not a lot of people, but I'm just thinking like that number hit through. I feel like there's a lot of people that I know that ended up having glandular fever around that age. Like it's sort of like that was the age 14 to 16 or something around there, that which we could connect to in the environmental aspect.
Sure.
And like even that complement system turning on, right? Because at that point we're actually potentially through the pubescent transition.
Yeah.
And now we're living in this new body in this new way. And if we haven't been like supported through that transition in a way that was revered and honoured and held, which I mean, I don't know a single person personally who had that, where there was like to some extent a ceremonious transition into being this new and improved human.
Like the chicken pox, it's almost like a rite of passage type thing, because everyone gets it as a kid. Not that you should get sick from it, but it's a very similar
age-appropriate illness that actually doesn't happen anymore.
Doesn't it?
No.
Yeah, right.
It's not a very common, because we're really big on getting rid of all sorts of pathogens. Like it's
because germs are bad, aren't they?
Yes. So we're trying to, eradicate all forms of viruses.
All microbial life.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we'll learn slowly that that mightn't be the best option, but I think that there's been, you know, people thought that that was great. So they're still going down that path, and instead of actually introspecting and looking at ourselves and going, hang on a minute, the way I live my life, the way that I, as a parent or a parent to be, work and like, you know, punish myself day in, day out, whether that's working too much, staying up too late, not following any of the pillars of health that we've outlined earlier.
Episode 2 or 3.
But, you know, we're just punishing ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we come back to this and all of a sudden we're getting these rashes and I'm getting hives and I now have asthma and I never really had it, or I used to have these things as a child, and now all of a sudden they've come back randomly, probably on one of those cycles where the complement system is like, all right, I'm going to do a refresh now. And I would say that maybe it's every 15, 20 years, but also we're having that cycles are happening yearly. They're happening yearly for our own body. We have the ability for our cells to they're regrowing and regenerating constantly.
24/7, yeah.
And so we have this power in ourselves to actually action and change that. And I think that's what we're getting to in terms of autoimmune, is that you are not that. You don't have to be. But right now you're probably choosing to be. And there's obviously a point of no return, because sometimes, I see this in patients where I'm like, hey, I see you and I see that this doesn't have to be you. Do you see that?
All the time.
And that's really hard because they're like, no, I'm just going to go and get this cut out.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, I tried this for 6 weeks or 6 months and you know what, actually I'm just going to cut it out. I'm like, well, we didn't actually get to the bottom. You didn't, not that I have the key, but I do feel like that I have a few keys available or tools. And I'm like, here, come with me.
But everything we've spoken about in this series is essentially the driving force, because it all starts with that mental configuration.
Mental configuration, that's the one.
The pre-thought process, the archetypal influence that essentially drives our thoughts, that form our beliefs, that determine our behavior, that direct an outcome. It all starts with the thought, arguably.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
So it comes back to, you know,
our mental configuration. And I think that I'm going to round it up because that feels really good right now. So, yeah, I'd just like to say, is there a few things that you would like to offer for people that are actually currently either experiencing an autoimmune disease or have small signs and symptoms that could be likened to an autoimmune disease?
Well, usually the first one, it can, if we're talking symptoms, it can be very disease specific. The one thing that I recently just worked with was rheumatoid arthritis, and that's just inflammation in the joints, but it's the immune system depositing immune complexes into the joint where it attacks the synovium of the joint. So we worked on a lot of his suppressed emotions, and once he got everything out and he felt safe enough to do that and then express that to someone in his life, I think 90% of his symptoms went away.
Okay,
and so I'm saying anything that's suppressed has got to come out.
Okay, and do you have any quick tips or tricks on how someone that may or may not know what direction to go, what they could do?
So
simply
fast. Simply and fast. First, identify how you feel. Write it down, voice note, however you need to get it out. Just be aware of something that's there. Second, really identify what you need in your environment that you need to heal. It might be certain people, So certain people who have gone through the same thing and come out of it successfully are really good to have around. Someone or somewhere where you feel safe enough to let that out.
So it's like, yep. Next step.
You can say practice gratitude and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it's more, I've had a lot of success with having when they write out their own timeline. So from birth up until this point, it's a straight line. All the positive things have happened above the line, all the negative below. You can start to see a pattern. And with each positive and negative, you can attach an emotion to that or emotions. And then from there, you can see the roadmap of how you got to where you kind of went. And then you can go through this is just one way, you can go through the process of connecting to each sort of memory, each emotion. But then because you're literally a new person from that event or that trauma or whatever happened, you can now witness it instead of being a victim to it. So there's a big correlation between the victim archetype, the saboteur, and autoimmune. What about from TCM?
Yeah, I'm not going there right now because I have to compact your fast idea.
Right.
Simple. So writing it down. So every day writing down how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Then once you've written it down, you need to find a mentor of sorts. That mentor may be someone that's experienced what you've experienced and come out the other side. It might be someone that's actually able to, like a practitioner that's going to be able to support you to feel safe, to express clearly all of the things that need to be cleared.
Mm-hmm.
Then the option of using a life timeline, positives above, negatives below, attaching emotion to those things. So essentially you have your line, you'll have your positive experience, then you'll have the emotion that you felt there. Then you have your negative experience and your emotion you felt there with your ages along the map. So creating that map to see your patterns and your emotional timeline. And then connecting to those memories with the emotion and feeling them and disconnecting from them and watching them instead of being in them and allowing them to process around you. And what I would say is to then witness and see the gift that has given you. And if you've been playing out this mental configuration over and over and over, you will start to see maybe what soul's been trying to bang into your mind.
And maybe if you look at the name of the disease, autoimmune, the first word, auto, you've been in automatic pilot for too long.
Yeah. So that feels really big. And I think that as a starting place, that's your place to start. And yeah, there's lots of different pieces to autoimmune in terms of Chinese medicine we didn't really touch on today, but it's sort of, I think that this really encompasses that idea that your body is essentially attacking itself. So you have to distinguish the self. And here are your dot points from Matt's, and I agree, perspective to actually get that done.
Yes.
And, if you need the support to actually do that with someone, well, Matt and I are here, and this is essentially the work that we're working with people day in and day out. So find yourself, connect to self, allow yourself to flow down the stream in whatever way that looks for you.
Trust yourself, love yourself. My job.
Thanks for today, guys. We'll
See you next time, guys.
week.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.